No, and I do think that out of crisis comes community in many, many instances. And I think that, and I remember this going back to the time when I used to do some work in Houston.
Mm.
Occasionally, Texas, I had to go to Texas quite a bit and then be flying back to California. And I happened to be sat alongside this lady who was, I don't know, you know, maybe late 60s, early 70s, something like that. She'd lost her husband in that previous year, she told me. But she was explaining to me that back in, it was either the late 50s or sometime early 60s. She said that she was living in some house in the Midwest. It was like Tornado Alley kind of thing. And sure enough, one day they got the warning. She was working in the bank, so they all had to go down into the vault so for safety, and then they came up again afterwards. And this tornado that had ripped through the town was basically it's a I think 35 people died, something like that. But you know what tornadoes do, right? They do an absolute line straight through and destroyed it. And what their house was one of the things that was gone. And she said that, her and her husband met. They were young at that particular point in time. They met up afterwards and they looked at it and they thought, wow, you know, for the first time ever, they realized that everything in that house was just stuff, right? And she said that after that, it took a couple of years to get the house rebuilt and everything like that. She said, but their mindset after that was completely different. They got themselves an RV, they traveled extensively throughout their life because they realized that life was actually about experiencing life, right? Not living in your little box. And she said that that was a blessing. That tornado was a blessing, and it was historic because I remember. In fact, if I find the picture, I'll put it on here. But she said, "Oh, you'll know," because she gave me the name of the town. She said, "But it was like there was a classic picture of this train that had been lifted off the track and was actually draped over the top of a grain hopper, right? And you can imagine how much power it takes to lift a train, a freight train off a track and over the top of this grain hopper. But that was the point, right? Because that was a crisis. That for them was a crisis, but again, community banded together around, everybody helps everybody. And all of a sudden, you realize what humanity is about. It's not living in your little box away from everybody else.
Yeah.
It's actually that sense of community where you are drawn to help each other
Yes.
and then reevaluate. Okay, you now have freedom because you don't have stuff anymore, right? But you
There's
do have your
yeah.
family.
Still have your family. There's a hysterical thing. I think it's Wendell Berry who said something like, "Don't have so much stuff that you're grateful when your barn burns down," something like that. And I have heard people talk about that they have all this stuff and it becomes this burden that they have to take care of or I told you, I know before somebody asked John Rockefeller how much more money would be enough and he said just a little more. It's like this insatiability because I'm feeding my hunger with the wrong stuff. Again, I know I told you this before. It's like if I'm hungry and I'm eating Twinkies, I don't know where the hell that comes from. It's like my physical body might be full, but I'm still starving because I
Mm,
haven't eaten anything nourishing.
yes.
Um, so, I think this is just a good point to be making in terms of this conversation about what's going on now today, John, that there are these horrific things that are happening. They've been set up to happen because they're the consequences of choices we've made that have brought us to this place. I also, I love that whole sort of Pluto and Aquarius metaphor that something grows and then it grows to the point where it starts corrupting and then it needs to die.
Mm.
What's that quotation from Lao Tzu? I think you had that very often a new beginning shows up. What is it?
New beginnings are often disguised as painful endings. That's
So
it.
here we are. And so whether it's the painful ending of a marriage or a sense of yourself as being able-bodied in a certain kind of way, it's an interesting dance between the challenges and so-called failures, and then what we do with them. And then also the fact that, and that's I think what the Hopi prophecy is tracking, that we're going through this mess because it's needed,
Yeah.
because so much of our institutions have come to a place where they're causing harm to people, community, the earth, etc. And so it needs to die.
Yes.
Um, so as that is happening, and as we gather together, love one another, assist one another, mourn for one another, do whatever we're going to do as we gather, then there's also at the same time this invitation to start developing these inner technologies, because I think we're going to go to a place where maybe we don't have cancers anymore. Or if we have cancers, they're quickly,
Yeah.
resolved. So it's going to be interesting. I think it'll be in my next life or lives to see this balance between the necessary dyings that happen in order for new birth to happen, and at the same time, these inner technologies that might actually prevent some of the dyings that would have happened from
Mm,
happening.
mm,
We're really in kind of this very interesting flux of surrender and empowerment.
yeah.
Surrender to that river, let go. She knows what she's doing.
Mm,
And even as we are surrendering into that and realizing we need to go through this very difficult time, and maybe that's what you're tracking when you talk about your excitement, because there is also this awareness that there's some bubbling underneath that is just unimaginably creative.
for sure. For sure. Now, I think that we are going to receive so much. And I think because the thing is that, mankind has proven that as we have been gifted with new technologies in the recent, like over the last century, for instance, what happens? What happens is that it gets anything that's really worth having, it will be taken, it will be weaponized, it will be used to control, right? So consciousness on the planet has to rise to such a point whereby when these technologies are allowed through, because let's face it, okay, this is, and I know we don't think of it like this, but out there in the ether are ideas. Out there are, and we can tap into that. And if, as like you were saying with your healing, you had to learn that. It's not just a case of just you got to work, okay?
Yeah,
But do what gives you joy,
yeah,
because that is the point. You knew you were going to be a healer,
yeah.
so that was where you were drawn. So I think that you have to do. It's like a pianist, a
Mm,
composer, right?
good point.
You've got to learn how to play. You've got to learn because then at some point you become a channel for this beautiful divine music to come through you. That's how it works. So if you want to be the best writer, you've got to write. You've got to, and then become this channel for the wisdom to come through you as well, and the
Mhm,
stories that come through you
mhm,
that you can share with the world. It's
mhm.
fantastic. But the fact is that our consciousness has to raise to such a level, and it is doing, okay, because the vibration on the planet is going forever up. We're hitting all these solar flares and all the rest of it. It's all increasing the vibrational frequency on the planet. So those low vibration frequencies will not be able to survive in the long term anyway. So that's just a
Right.
matter of fact. But as our consciousness raises, then this new technology comes in that enables us to live life in a way that we would never have been able to live it before, with
Yes.
grace and with ease and with gratitude and in
Yes.
harmony with the planet, which is
Yes.
really important.
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
And understanding our cosmic relationship as well to the rest of
To the
whatever's
rest.
going on out
Yes.
there.
Yeah. It's I love that as you're saying, I was thinking you're right. It's like you don't give a gun to a 2-year-old. Um,
Right.
and I think what the Hopis have got is that this is people of a certain consciousness getting access to all this power and taking us away, because the wounded ego is all about, you know I need to be God, and not in the spiritual sense of course, we are all manifestations of the divine. But this is like my ego. I mean, I look at poor Elon Musk and I think, oh my God, that guy must have had a terrible childhood. He's like so, there's a level of excitement in him that just feels so ungrounded.